hello to my panelists. So I want to start by zipping along the line and getting the panelists to give a 30-second introduction about who they are and what they do, because we've got some very eclectic skill sets and experiences here. So Henrietta, let's start with you. You are a youth voices advocate who focuses on narrowing education barriers for girls in STEM and also the impact of climate change on women. Tell us a bit about what you do.
Hiya, so I'm a Youth Voices advocate here at the Women's Forum, but I'm also interning at Sanofi on my year abroad. I'm still a student, and I'm also a youth ambassador for the European Union delegation in the UK to enhance European mobility, and also a proud advocate and researcher for researching the impacts of climate change on women's sexual and reproductive health and rights.
You're a very busy woman. Ingrid, over to you.
Thank you. Well, my name is Ingrid. I'm an engineer turned educator. I went from a very male-dominated field in computing engineering to the field of education. I'm currently the executive director of Educación 2020, a nonprofit that advocates for quality education for children in Latin America. And I'm also a teacher at college currently. I have about 100 students, 19-year-olds, whom I teach economics.
Okay, again, how do you get all of that done? And you're based in Chile. Nelson.
Thank you so much. My name is Nelson. I'm an activist. I'm a whistleblower. I also started my career in marketing in FMCG. Right now, I work for an NGO as a consultant, as a startup mentor. I mentor small, early-stage startups in the Global South. And also, I advise businesses, mostly in Africa, on how to deal with governments. And also, I advise governments on how to deal with businesses. So that's basically who am I.
And you've got an amazing story, which we will hear in a second. And Sander, over to you, last but not least.
Great, thank you very much. So my name is Sander Volten. I'm the CEO of the Seismic Foundation. Like many of you, I spent 25 years in advertising, and as I was turning 50, I decided I wanted to leave advertising and dedicate the rest of my life to something more impactful, which has become raising the awareness around the impact of AI. I actually met a very inspiring woman who, when I wasn't even started my year off, convinced me that this topic was important for us. And she explained to me that this topic is not just important because of the things it will do to our day-to-day life in terms of how our children grow up in this world, for healthcare, for our jobs, but also more serious risks like bad actors being able to obtain biological weapons. Secondly, she explained that the companies that are developing this technology, when you ask them by their own admission, will tell you that they don't understand why the technology does what it does, which is very scary. And third, in the country that most of these companies are based, there is actually no legislation to control them. So clearly it's a topic that requires further awareness.
And Ingrid, maybe let's stay on that topic and come to you with your educational background. What do you think the roles of governments are, the roles of the public and private sector in keeping young people safe in this age of very exciting but also potentially quite dangerous technological advancement that we're seeing? And it goes without saying, as Sabine said, young people, we can't talk about them as one homogenous group. It obviously experience varies greatly, and we're going to try and dig into differences of geography and socioeconomic background during this conversation. But Ingrid, over to you.
Thank you. So the role that I see in technology in education today, maybe it's a bit of a different situation in the developing world, is that it has the potential to close barriers, to close gaps, but it also has the potential to open them. Today in schools in Chile, probably the most favored ones have teachers with the time and the resources and the knowledge to incorporate, technology in their classes, when at the same time there are a lot of schools, and most of the schools do not have that. So I think the role of policy and the role of the institutionality in education is to create the condition and set certain minimum levels and then trying to raise them, right? So everyone can access to the good part of the technology, and also creating frameworks in which we can make sure that students, especially, you know, we're talking about young people that are exposed to the dangers of it, to, you know, navigate in a safe way.
And are there any countries globally that you think are really doing well with the policy part of keeping young people safe?
I would say no. I don't think I mean, the thing with technology, and especially AI today, is that it's advancing at such a rapid, you know, pace that it's pretty much impossible for a policy to be designed, you know, at the moment it's published, it's probably already obsolete. So I think there's a lesson to be learned from policymakers as well in how to design, you know, normative frameworks that are flexible enough so that policy can remain updated even when the technology is being changed.
Nelson, let's come to you, because so much of what you have achieved is also based on the power of the online world and technology. Tell us a bit about what happened to you last year and why you decided to blow the whistle on the Kenyan government and a deal that it was undertaking with a big Indian conglomerate.
Thank you. So last year, I became a whistleblower, and I did it from Paris. Like, I wasn't in Kenya. I come from Kenya. So the whole of it, everything ran on social media. So I never went to Kenya, but the impact was immense of the expose. And the reason why I did it is because I thought, yes, it's very dangerous, and I might be risking my life to do it. But in the end, silence is far much worse than to speak up. And plus, sometimes your insignificant action could actually become an avalanche that will eventually, you know, bring change that we all want to see in this world. So I came across documents. They were actually sent to me by some whistleblowers from the government, and they couldn't do it because they're in Kenya, and it's very dangerous to do that when you're in the country. So I went through the documents. It was about our main airport in Nairobi, which the government wanted to sell for the next 30 years to an Indian conglomerate, which is very, you know, corrupt. The previous year, they were already in a short-selling scandal. They were short-selling their shares. Yeah, so once I read about them, I was like, this company is bad news for Kenya. And plus, the concession agreement was 90% against the country. It was good for them as a business, but it wasn't good for the people, because normally in government, it's not profit first, it's actually service to the people, and then profit comes last. But in this case, it was profit, and then the people will suffer in the process. So I went online and I posted about this, and overnight, it got 1 million views overnight. It created public outrage. So we had protests before in Kenya because of tax hikes, and this just coming 2 weeks after the tax hikes, it created a new momentum for the protests, and the youth, the Gen Z, so we later call it the Gen Z movement, they went to the streets without me. I was in Paris, but the impact was real. It was on the streets. It was in parliament. It was on TV being discussed by experts. It was in the newspapers. The international media also picked it up. So it became like a big scandal, and the company had to pull back. The government also came, and actually the president, he canceled the deals on national TV. And not only the airport concession, but also another agreement that the government had already signed with Adani. So it was the whole Adani group that was unwanted in Kenya. So thanks to the expose that we did, we stopped a $2 billion airport concession that was going to be up for 30 years and favoring only Adani, not the country. And some people were going to lose their jobs, so it wasn't a really nice deal. And an electricity transmission contract, which was already signed, was cancelled as well. And it was cancelled because the EPC costs were much higher than other competitors, but anyway, it was signed. But thanks to the movement, and I wouldn't say it's only because of me that it was cancelled, I was only the spark. But the real impact was the outrage and the people that came out to protest, the airport workers that went on strike and paralyzed the operations of the airport, and the people, the civil society, the Law Society of Kenya that went to court. So it was a big movement.
Big team,
Yeah.
collective.
A collective
collective.
action.
And I want to bring Henrietta in on that point, because what Nelson is discussing is a movement or an expose that happened online and then converted into real world action. I'd love to hear your experience of pockets of optimism that you're seeing amongst your generation of online movements that are affecting real world change in this very complicated moment that we're in globally.
I think what's quite interesting to see is actually potentially a move away from technology and from the online sphere into a more collective approach in reality amongst young people. I mean, the Financial Times recently produced a report saying that young people's use of social media is actually starting to reduce. And whilst those of older generations is increasing. And what I find particularly interesting about that is that I have grown up my whole life with technology. I was born into a world with all of it already existing. And we're almost wanting a change from that and wanting to see real results and real action. And I think with the rise of AI that we're seeing actually, it's almost hard to tell what's real, what's fake. And so we start turning to the reality, to our communities. And I think this is one of the biggest problems in our society is the division. We're incredibly interconnected, our world, all globally, and yet we're remarkably divided. And what brings us together, yes, we can find out new information, find out new communities online, but what we want, what we really gain the gratification is actually meeting people. You know, we see everyone here today. They're enjoying talking to people rather than just doing it online on Zoom. You know, half of my school life was on Zoom.
And the complexity that comes with that is that a lot of young people feel that maybe they don't have the confidence or the social skills to get out and meet people. So it's bridging that gap as well.
Absolutely, and bridging the gap between what we see online, because we're all living in echo chambers. You know, we're in an echo chamber right now, really, and it's instead trying to find a community in that and engage with other people and create that movement. And that's what we're seeing a lot with, for example, my role on the Youth Advisory Council for the EU. With Brexit, young people in the UK haven't been able to access opportunities that they want to go and move abroad. They don't want to do it online. They want to go and move and travel. And I think, you know, this is more important than ever in a world of technology, is embracing technology, but also embracing what we've all grown up with, which is the real world.
And Sandra, I want to come to you. We're at the Women's Forum, so I would be remiss not to ask about gender gaps in tech adoption. And generally speaking, data shows that men adopt AI quicker than women. I'm interested in any trends you're seeing in your research and how we can try and close those gaps before they get too wide.
Yeah, I mean, it's very inspiring to hear these stories, and I think everyone's here because of finding a group that has the courage to really change the world. And I'm glad to see that in the field that I now operate in, also there is groups of young people showing up every day to demand that their voices are heard. There's a group in 40 countries called Encode Justice, run by a young woman, Sneha Heverson, who fight for having a say in what that future should look like. And I think in kind of this battle for AI, there's kind of three battles going on at once. One is battle for attention, one is a battle for the economy, and one is this battle for super intelligence. And I'll just touch upon two of them. So I think we've all seen kind of the destruction of the incentive of the attention economy through social media. And I think it's actually increasing today through the effects of AI, where now 12% of kids are turning to their chatbots to get very personal information that you should not be getting from a insensitive source of information like that. And there's terrible examples where an unfortunate case in California this summer where a young boy committed suicide because from going to doing his homework with his chatbot, he was led down a spiral where the chatbot suggested 250 times that perhaps suicide was the better choice for him, and then he did end up committing suicide. The other battle of the economy, you're very right. I think our research shows that for jobs that are now held by women, there's a 3 times higher chance for those jobs to disappear through the effects of AI. And I think if we look at the investments that are made in this industry of AI, the only real explanation that we can have is that in the end, they're looking to sell subscriptions to replace workers and thereby making the money back that they are investing at today. So I think it's a worrying development, and it warrants all of us to really pay attention to it.
And so on that note of jobs possibly being absorbed by AI, and this is a question to anyone, how should we be rethinking the way we are educating our young people to properly prepare them for this new workforce that they'll be entering into? And that's to any of you. Yeah, Ingrid.
So at the beginning of school year in Chile, which is March, we had a lot of media asking us what did we wish for the new school year, and it's very tempting to wish all students and teachers a great school year with no setbacks, but to wish that it's impossible. In the world that we live today, it is completely impossible to design a school year that is not going to have setbacks. There's going to be weather problems, there's going to be natural disasters, kids are going to get sick, they're going to have problems back home, they're going to miss classes, teachers are going to also have leaves. Things are going to happen, so it's not going to be a smooth ride, And because that happens in school, it is the perfect place where we can teach students that life is like that. There is no life without setbacks. And because of that, it's much more important to teach them to not only, math and literature and everything, but also that whenever there are obstacles, we need to be flexible, we need to adapt, we need to be able to change what we had planned in the beginning, we need to work as a team to face this kind of difficulties, and that, going back to the point of policy, that should be, in national curriculums, in orientation for planning, in how teachers are trained in the, as undergrad training. So schools are a great place where we can teach our children to become resilient, citizens of the world.
And also, I imagine, double down on human skills, because they are the traits that will not be overtaken by AI as time goes on. Nelson, I imagine that since you had your huge year last year, a lot of people are coming to you for advice on how to speak up against injustice or how to create a movement. What do you say to them?
I think courage is very practical. You cannot just tell somebody to be courageous, but you can give them practical steps to be courageous. Like you have to have facts, document, you have to have allies, look for perhaps a lawyer or journalists who can back your story. Lawyers are great because they'll tell you, what can get you jailed or not. So yeah, like I have in the past 1 year about 5 defamation suits and 2 were in France. Yeah, so it's important to have allies and to understand what you're getting yourself into, and if you have the bandwidth to actually go the whole 9 yards, and if you have these things in your mind, then it's easier for you to be courageous in corporate, in the political, everywhere, in all facets of life. So you need to understand this, because sometimes you may think, for example, in a company, you see something wrong and you want to whistleblow it to your superiors, and perhaps your superiors are in it, and you can get fired, or something can happen to you. So you need to be smart about it. The world is full of bad people, but the majority are good people. So you need to create allies, and this can give you courage to do whatever you want to do.
Henrietta, round of applause. We can give Nelson a round of applause for that. Henrietta, what is the biggest misconception about your generation?
I think it's that we're apathetic and not willing to want to change, or always online. I mean, as I said before, we're actually seeing the reduction of the use of technology, or at least of social media. But I think what's particularly sad is that because there's almost a narrative that young people, it's either a narrative that they want to make so much change, or they talk about the woke generation, or that they don't want to make a change. And what we're actually saying is there's an increasing divide, obviously between generations, but also between men and women, or girls and boys. Girls becoming more liberal or wanting, more progression, boys turning to the manosphere. We're seeing the rise of Andrew Tate and all of that. So I think what we're saying is actually we can't just really be describing how do we see young people. It's actually how do we see different communities of young people. It's different around the world, different depending on gender. And so I think the biggest misconception is almost we as young people almost need to realize that there's a big fight ahead of us and the world is changing. And I think older generations, what the responsibility is to ensure education isn't just... It's not just about preparing us for technology or future skills, which is, of course, incredibly important, but it's also preparing us for a world which is becoming divided, a world where there are wars, genocides. And instead, it's showing us, for example, this summer, my summer job was being a French supply teacher in a terrible secondary school, my old secondary school, which definitely brought up my resilience, but it was also... I was trying to convince the students why learning French is incredibly important, despite the rise of technology and AI. And the way I framed it was, it just unlocks a different part of your brain. And I think that's the importance of learning in general, at whatever age, is unlocking a different way of seeing the world and becoming empathetic and becoming more resilient in the face of disaster.
Which often happens when you get off your phone as well, you find. A question to any of you, what's an issue facing young people that we're not talking about enough?
I'd like to quickly jump in there. This is based on my work to do with sexual and reproductive rights when it comes to climate change. And it's something we don't really discuss, or if we do discuss it, it's to do with population control and saying people are having too many babies and we need to stop because that's creating climate change. And I think one of the biggest problems is that we're not focusing actually on empowering the most vulnerable communities who are at most risk from climate change. Girls are missing out on school because they now have to go and collect water and spend longer going to collect water, for example, or they're being sold off as child brides because of climate-induced poverty. Or they're choosing to marry because they think it's a better life for them, because that's the world that we've created, is that young girls are choosing to marry because of the dire world we are living in. So I think that's an incredibly terrible thing that's happening in the world and not really being discussed. COP's going on at the moment. I doubt we'll hear about climate change and sexual and reproductive health and rights. So that's also something to bear in mind.
Yeah, keep banging the drum for those incredibly important issues. Sandra, one last question to you, and then I'm going to do a quick fire to end. For the people in the room who have young people in their lives, when should they first start talking to them about AI and technology, and how?
That's an interesting question. When should we speak? I think you need to speak to them very early. We're actually launching a first campaign in 2 weeks that is actually about talking to your children before they turn to an AI, because not just should you explain to them that when they start speaking to an AI, chatbot, and there's many very cool ones where you can, it looks like a very cool figure, and they can actually really chat to you much better than any friend could. So there are dangers there, but also just the normal conversations that we as parents tend to have with our children about sensitive topics, be it what sexuality are you, or if you like a boy, how should you approach the boy, or things that are normally discussed between either you or your parents or you or your close friends. Sensitive topics, we see more and more that kids are turning to chatbots to actually have those conversations, and chatbots are not trained to have those conversations. So it's pretty sensitive topic for that. So I would say that parents should be talking to their children about how do you actually interact with this new technology in general. And I think it comes down to like giving them the tools and the flexibility to really manifest that themselves. Without, of course, scaring them, because I have 2 teenagers at home, so if you tell them something to do, then, of course, they will do the opposite. So you must, be...
But when children are, I don't know, 5, 6, is that the age that you start when they're really young?
I think when they're very young, you need to start explaining to them that this is not a human friend. This is a technology.
Okay. And to finish, I'd love to hear from you all one thing that you want the people in this room to go away and say to the young people they know, or maybe help them with. And Ingrid, I want to start with you, if that's okay.
I'm not sure this is something that you can go and say to young people, but it's a message that I would like to that I would like you all to bear in mind when you talk to young people. We've talked and heard at length these 2 days about courage, but courage is oftentimes comes at a cost, right? So I think that all the people that we are here today, we have some sort of privilege, either economic privilege, social privilege, and that should allow us to not ask someone else to bear the cost, but to, pay the cost ourselves, which is probably, it's less of a toll than others that don't have the privilege that many people here have. So I would urge you to bear that in mind, that, you cannot ask people that are in a much vulnerable situation to bear the cost of being courageous.
That's a really good point. Henrietta, let's come to you. A message for or an action for the young people that we all know in our lives.
I think I'm going to switch it up a bit and actually say what you want to say to your young people is also what you should be saying to your colleagues and your friends. We're telling young people to go off and get jobs or do internships, but it should also be your responsibility to tell your colleagues to start paying interns fair wages. We're talking about wanting to make sure that young people get off their phones, and yet we're seeing the rise in AI in companies, which I think needs to be, we need to make the use of it, but we also need to bear in mind what we're doing as well. So I think it's being self-aware if we're going to be projecting new ideas.
Great point. Sander, over to you, and then we'll close with Nelson.
Yeah, so I think for me, it's really about, so also our research shows that there is quite a bit of, I would say, pessimism or feeling the lack of control over your own future in a generation. And I would say to the generation that you have the agency to build the future. You are the future, so it's in your hands what the future will bring. And if you decide that technology is there to serve your generation and not to overtake your generation, I feel that's in your hands to make that happen. So I think that would be what I say to the next generation.
No pressure, you're in charge of the future. Nelson, the final word.
Yeah, my final word actually is inspired by a previous speaker I was listening to in the morning. He said that he read some book which said paradigm shifts normally take 70 to 80 years, and the last one was in the 50s. So it means today we are experiencing another paradigm shift, and the youth need to understand that they are at the center of the paradigm shift. And I would give an example of Mam Dani. You guys also...
Yeah, he just won, for context, if anyone doesn't know, Mamdani winning the New York mayoral election this week.
Exactly. He's
34.
The new mayor, yeah, and he's very young. He's a very young millennial. And this means that even as youth movements are super successful on the streets, they could actually transform street power into actual political power and change policy and be the change makers. We don't, have to keep saying we need things to be done different. We can do the things different ourselves. And Mamdani is a great example.
Henrietta, Ingrid, Nelson, and Sander, thank you so much for the work you're doing, and thank you so much for being with us this afternoon.